My stepdad handed my college savings to his real daughter and still bragged about funding my education. One social media post destroyed his reputation. Can you imagine dedicating 8 years of your life to a dream, only to have it ripped away by the very person who promised to make it come true? What if that person was your stepfather who looked you in the eye and said, "You're my daughter now. I'm going to pay for your education just like a real father would," then betrayed you in the most painful way possible? I was 9 years old when Richard married my mom. I remember it like yesterday. He stood in our living room, put a hand on my shoulder, and made that promise. He even repeated it at the reception, in front of 20 witnesses. For 8 years, that promise shaped my entire life. Seriously, I studied harder, knowing college was guaranteed. I took every brutal AP class, practically destroyed my social life, skipped parties, and busted but to maintain a 4.0 GPA. When I was 16, I turned down a job because Richard told me, "Don't worry about money, kiddo. Focus on academics. Your tuition is covered." He'd bring it up constantly. Apply wherever you want. Price doesn't matter. When guidance counselors asked about financial limits, Richard would jump in. "Sky's the limit. This one's going to the best school that accepts her." And my mom? She just beamed every single time. Richard made bank, like $300,000 a year as a regional director for a hotel chain, plus bonuses. We drove a Tesla, my mom had a Mercedes, we went on European vacations. We lived in this huge 6-bedroom house with a pool. Money was never, ever a problem. His biological daughter, Haley, lived out in Colorado with her mom. She visited 2 weeks every summer, but she was basically a stranger. She was 3 years older than me, already in community college when Richard started making all those promises about my education. Then came senior year. I got into Northwestern, a dream school, but it was $60,000 a year. Richard, true to form, said, "Price doesn't matter. You worked for this. You deserve the best." I also got into a state school with a partial scholarship, which would have made it $15,000. But he insisted on Northwestern. May 1st, decision day. I committed. I put down my deposit with money from my part-time job, started buying dorm supplies, told everyone where I was going, joined accepted student groups, even found a roommate. I was on top of the world. Fast forward to August 1st. Tuition for the first semester was due, $20,000. I reminded Richard 2 weeks before. We were at dinner. That's when he dropped the bomb. "Haley needs help," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Haley had dropped out of community college, gotten pregnant, and needed money for an apartment. Richard had given her $60,000, the exact amount of my first year's tuition. "You understand, right?" he asked. "She's in crisis. You can take out loans." My mom sat there, silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I pulled out my phone, showed him texts where he promised to pay, emails telling me to pick Northwestern, the video from their wedding where he announced he'd pay for my college. He just shrugged. "Plans change," he said, utterly cold. "I have to prioritize my actual daughter." 8 years. 8 years of him calling me his daughter, gone in one cruel sentence. My world shattered. I had 3 weeks until move-in day. Northwestern required payment, or they'd drop my enrollment. It was too late to switch to the state school. Their deadline had passed. I was about to lose everything because Richard decided his actual daughter mattered more. In a panic, I called my grandmother, my mom's mom. She lived in Florida on Social Security, but she had one thing Richard didn't: integrity. She had my grandfather's life insurance policy, $200,000 she'd never touched, saving it for her end-of-life care. "How much do you need?" she asked, without a moment's hesitation. "No, Grandma," I choked out. "I can't take your safety net." But she insisted. "How much?" I told her, $20,000 for the semester. The next day, she sent $40,000. Enough for the full year. "Pay me back when you're a doctor," she said with a wink. with interest. I didn't tell Richard or my mom. Let them think I'd taken out loans. I moved into Northwestern that September. Richard even posted on Facebook about being a proud dad, sending his daughter to college. I just didn't correct him. Then October came. Haley called me, crying. The $60,000 was gone. Her boyfriend had spent it all on a truck and gambling. She needed more money. Richard had said no, because he'd already given her my college fund. She wanted me to talk to him. He gave you my college money. I snapped. That was all of it. But you got loans, right? You're fine. I have a baby coming. I hung up. I just couldn't. In December, I made the dean's list. Richard, predictably, posted about it on Facebook again. So proud of my daughter's achievements at Northwestern. His friends congratulated him on raising such a smart kid. That's when I finally decided. Enough. I posted my own update. Thank you all for the kind words. I should clarify that Richard is not paying for my education, as he promised for 8 years. He gave my college fund to his biological daughter in August. My grandmother, who lives on Social Security, paid my tuition from her life insurance savings. Richard has contributed exactly $0 to my education, but continues to take credit for my achievements. I tagged him and all his friends who'd commented. Within an hour, his phone was blowing up. His boss saw it, his golf buddies, his siblings. Everyone who'd heard him brag for years about paying for my college now knew the truth. He called me, screaming. His voice came through the phone like a chainsaw, every word cutting and tearing at me. I pulled the phone away from my ear, but I could still hear him raging about his reputation, his career, his standing in the community. My mom's crying filled the background, a high-pitched sobbing that made my chest ache. I waited for her to take the phone, waited for her to tell Richard to calm down, waited for her to defend me even once. She never did. The crying just continued while Richard screamed about betrayal and humiliation. I pressed the phone back to my ear and let him finish his rant. When he finally paused to breathe, I spoke in the calmest voice I could manage. You need to delete the post, he demanded. Immediately. You're lying about everything, making me look like a monster when I only tried to help my family. I cut him off. Every word in that post was true. I have texts, emails, the video from your wedding. 8 years of promises, all documented. He started threatening to cut off all contact. Said I'd never be welcome in his house again. Said I was dead to him. I hung up before he could finish. My hands shook as I set the phone on my desk. 3 knocks hit my door. It was Maya, my roommate, asking if I was okay. She'd heard me through the wall. I opened the door, and she came in, still in her Northwestern sweatshirt and pajama pants. I showed her the Facebook post, explained everything from Richard's wedding promise to Grandma's life insurance. Maya read through the comments, already piling up. She hugged me tight. You did the right thing, she said firmly. Richard deserved to be exposed. Anyone who breaks promises to kids deserves whatever consequences come their way. We sat on my bed and watched the post explode. Within 2 hours, 300 comments, 200 shares. Most people supported me, calling Richard selfish and cruel, praising Grandma for stepping up. They questioned how someone making $300,000 a year could abandon his stepdaughter. A few family members defended him. His cousin said family issues should stay private. His aunt said I was being dramatic. His poker buddy said kids expected everything handed to them. But they were drowned out by dozens of people calling Richard a liar and a fraud. My phone rang again. Different number. I answered cautiously. It was Richard's brother, Tom. He introduced himself, his voice tired and sad. He said he'd always suspected Richard was full of hot air about paying for my college. Then he told me something shocking. Their own father had done the exact same thing to Richard years ago. Made big promises about paying for Richard's education, then spent the money on a boat. Richard had to work 3 jobs to get through community college. I thought Richard would be different, Tom sighed. Thought he'd break the cycle. Guess I was wrong. He apologized for not speaking up sooner. Said he should have warned me not to count on Richard's promises. I thanked him for calling, for believing me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. She said I shouldn't have aired family business publicly. Asked why I didn't come to her first. I stared at that text for 5 full minutes. Then I typed my response. I came to you at dinner when Richard called Haley his actual daughter. I came to you when he gave away my college fund. You sat there silent both times. Never defended me. Never questioned his choices. You just sat there and let him betray me. I hit send and put my phone face down. Another message came through minutes later. This one from Haley. Long, venomous paragraphs about how selfish I was, how I was trying to ruin her father's reputation because I was jealous of their relationship. She claimed the $60,000 was always meant for her emergency. Said Northwestern was a luxury school I didn't need. Said I could have gone to community college, like she did. Said I was spoiled and ungrateful. My baby deserves that money more than you deserve a fancy education. I screenshot the message, saved it to my photos. Maya looked over my shoulder and read it. Document everything, she said, in case this gets worse. We created a folder on my laptop, saving every message, every email, every text, screenshots of Richard's Facebook posts before he could delete them, screenshots of all the comments, the wedding video. Everything organized, backed up to cloud storage. Maya said we were building a case file. I didn't know what kind of case, but having documentation felt smart. My Facebook notifications kept pinging. I opened the app and saw a new comment from Violet Cameron, a family friend who'd known me since I was 9. Her comment said she remembered Richard's wedding speech. Said she was there when he made those promises. I believe every word you wrote, she declared. Her support meant something because people in Richard's social circle respected her. She ran a successful business, volunteered with 3 charities. When Violet Cameron spoke, people listened. Within minutes, her comment had 50 likes. Others started sharing their own memories of Richard bragging about paying for my college. My phone buzzed with a private message. Carson Daniels, Richard's golf buddy. He apologized for congratulating Richard on my achievements. Said he had no idea Richard wasn't actually helping. Said he felt manipulated by the false narrative Richard had been pushing for years. Carson said he'd been telling everyone at the country club about Richard's generous support. Now, he felt like a fool for spreading lies. He asked if there was anything he could do to help. I thanked him, but said just knowing the truth was enough. I checked my phone the next morning. Richard had deleted his Northwestern acceptance post. The dean's list one too. Both gone from his profile like they never existed. But he was too late. Dozens of people had already screenshot everything. Maya, Carson, Violet, at least 20 others. His attempt to hide what he'd done just made him look worse. People started posting comments about how suspicious it was that he deleted everything right after my truth post went up. My phone rang around 10 that morning. Unknown number, local area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A man's voice asked if this was me and introduced himself as Tanner Joyce, Richard's boss. He'd seen my post through mutual Facebook connections and wanted to talk. His tone wasn't angry or accusatory. He sounded genuinely concerned. I need to understand the situation better, he said. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? I agreed to meet him the next day at a cafe near campus. The cafe was one of those places with mismatched furniture and local art. Tanner was already there, 2 coffees on the table. He stood up, shook my hand. He looked exactly like I'd pictured Richard's boss. Professional suit, kind eyes, probably in his 50s. He thanked me for meeting and slid one of the coffees toward me. Then he got straight to the point. Richard had been bragging at work for years about putting his daughter through Northwestern. Talked about it constantly in meetings at company events. Made it a big part of his personal brand. Tanner said the company valued integrity above everything else. He needed to understand the truth. I pulled out my phone and showed him everything. The texts, the emails, the wedding video. 8 years of promises, date stamped. Then I showed him the August text where Richard said plans changed and he had to prioritize his actual daughter. Tanner's face changed as he read. He looked genuinely disturbed. He kept scrolling, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. When he finished, he set my phone down carefully. This reflects very poorly on Richard's character and judgment, he said, especially for someone in a leadership position who is supposed to model company values. Tanner thanked me for my honesty. He said he'd be having a serious conversation with Richard about misrepresenting his personal life to colleagues. Richard had used the story to build credibility, to make himself look generous and family-oriented. Now it turned out the whole thing was a lie. Tanner appreciated me taking the time. As I walked back to my dorm, I realized Richard's professional reputation was taking real damage. This wasn't just social embarrassment anymore. His boss now knew he'd been lying to everyone at work for years. My grandmother called that afternoon. Her voice, warm and steady as always, said she'd been hearing about the Facebook drama through various family members and wanted to check on me. I started to apologize, but she cut me off. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself," she said, "and you shouldn't feel guilty about accepting my money. That's what family is supposed to do. Help each other when it matters." She'd been saving that life insurance money for years, and using it to help me get an education was exactly what my grandfather would have wanted. Then she told me something I didn't know. Richard had called her yesterday, trying to pressure her into deleting the post. He'd ranted about how I was ruining his reputation, making the family look bad. Told her she needed to talk sense into me. Grandma told him, "I'll do no such thing. You should be ashamed of yourself for breaking promises to a child. If you want your reputation back, start by actually keeping your word instead of lying about what a great father you are." I asked if she was facing any pressure from other family members about giving me the money. She laughed, said at 78 years old, she was too old to care what people thought. She'd made her decision, and she stood by it. Then she told me to focus on my studies and let the adults deal with their drama. "Richard made his own bed," she said. "Now he has to lie in it." I told her I loved her. She said she loved me too. After we hung up, I felt so grateful that at least one person in my family had my back, unconditionally. My mom called again that evening. This time, Richard wasn't in the background. Her voice sounded different, quieter, more honest. She said she'd been thinking about everything since my post went up and needed to admit something. She should have stood up for me at dinner. She was shocked and didn't know what to say, but that wasn't an excuse for her silence. She knew it wasn't right. I told her the truth. Your silence hurt almost as much as Richard's betrayal. I expected him to be selfish because he'd always put himself first, but I thought you would protect me. You're my mom. You were supposed to be on my side. Instead, you just sat there and let him call Haley his actual daughter and give away my future. She started crying, said she'd been trying to keep the peace for years, trying to make the marriage work, trying not to rock the boat. But somewhere along the way, she lost sight of what really mattered. She chose keeping Richard happy over protecting her own daughter. She was sorry. I didn't know what to say. She was finally admitting what I'd needed to hear for months, but it felt too late. The damage was done. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I needed time to process everything. She understood and asked if she could call again in a few days. I said yes. We hung up. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone. Maya came back from the library and found me. I told her about both calls, Grandma's and Mom's. Maya listened, then said something that stuck with me. My mom was finally waking up to reality, but that didn't erase 8 years of choosing Richard over me. I had every right to take my time deciding if I wanted to rebuild that relationship. She also said I should be proud of myself for standing up and telling the truth. A lot of people would have stayed silent. I thanked her, and we ordered pizza and watched terrible reality TV to get my mind off everything. The next morning, I woke up to a text from a number I didn't recognize. Richard's sister. She'd heard about everything through the family grapevine. She apologized for not knowing sooner what Richard had done. She said if she'd known, she would have said something immediately. Then she told me she was cutting off contact with Richard until he made things right with me. She said what he did was wrong, and she couldn't support that kind of behavior, even from her own brother. But the part that really shocked me was at the end of her message. She offered to contribute $5,000 toward my spring semester tuition. It's not the full amount Richard should have paid, she wrote, but I want to help offset some of the burden on your grandmother. $5,000 was a huge amount of money. It would make a real difference. But I also felt uncomfortable. Grandma had sacrificed so much, and now Richard's sister wanted to give me money too? It felt like I was becoming a charity case. I called Grandma. She was quiet for a moment. Accepting help isn't the same as being a charity case, she said, her voice full of wisdom. Richard's sister is trying to do the right thing because her brother did the wrong thing. That's different from you begging for money or not trying to handle things yourself. She reminded me that pride could be expensive, and sometimes the smart thing was to accept genuine help. I thanked her and said I'd think about it. I texted Richard's sister back, thanking her, but saying I needed time to think. She completely understood. The offer would stand. That same day, finals week started. 5 exams in 8 days. I needed to focus. Maya helped by taking my phone during study sessions, hiding it in her desk drawer. She said I was checking it every 5 minutes, killing my concentration. She was right. Every notification made me jump, thinking it might be Richard or Mom or someone else from the family drama. Without my phone, I could actually focus. My first exam, organic chemistry, was brutal, but I knew the material. Then calculus, statistics, literature, and finally intro psych. By the time I finished that last test, I was exhausted but relieved. I'd made it through my first semester of college despite everything. A week later, grades posted. I logged into the student portal, holding my breath. All A's. I'd maintained my 4.0 GPA. I sat there staring at the screen, a weird mix of emotions washing over me. Pride, because I'd worked incredibly hard. Relief, because I'd proven I could handle Northwestern. But also this bitter satisfaction, knowing I'd done it all without Richard's help. He tried to take credit, but these grades were mine. Every single one of them earned through my own effort while dealing with his betrayal and the family chaos that followed. Maya screamed when I showed her my grades and insisted we celebrate. We went to a little restaurant and she bought me dinner. She raised her soda and made a toast. To surviving your first semester and proving Richard wrong about everything. I clinked my glass against hers and felt genuinely happy for the first time in weeks. While we were eating, my phone buzzed. A Facebook notification. Carson Daniels had posted a comment on Richard's page. I opened it and read. He said he was disappointed in Richard for misrepresenting the situation. Said he'd always respected Richard, but learning the truth had changed his view. Then he praised my academic achievements and said I should be proud of what I'd accomplished on my own. Within an hour, 50 likes, a dozen shares. Other people from Richard's social circle were commenting, agreeing, sharing it. Richard's carefully built reputation was crumbling with each passing day. I showed Maya and she grinned. Karma is real, she said, and it's beautiful to watch. Winter break came. I packed my things, knowing I wasn't going back to the house with the pool and 6 bedrooms. I called Grandma. Can I stay with you? She said yes before I even finished asking. When I arrived in Florida, she showed me her craft room. She'd moved all her sewing stuff into the garage and set up a twin bed with new sheets, a small desk by the window, lavender sachets in the drawers. This space was mine without conditions or broken promises attached. Something tight in my chest loosened. Grandma made dinner, and we sat at her little kitchen table, eating pot roast while she told me about her church friends and their medical issues. Normal grandma stuff, the safest thing in the world after months of chaos. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The second day, Mom showed up at Grandma's door, carrying a bag from the bakery. Grandma let her in, then made herself scarce, checking the mail. Mom and I sat on Grandma's floral couch. She set the bakery bag between us like a peace offering. She looked older, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She asked about finals, and I told her about making Dean's List again. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I need to talk to you, she said, and took a deep breath. She started talking about the past 8 years. She knew Richard had issues, exaggerating, making promises he might not keep. She'd seen it before they married, but she ignored the warning signs because she was struggling financially as a single mom, and he offered security. The house, the cars, the vacations, they made her feel safe. She admitted she chose that feeling of safety over protecting me when Richard broke his promise. Her voice cracked when she said she sat silent at that dinner in August because she was scared of losing her comfortable life. Watching me post the truth on Facebook, seeing everyone's reactions, made her realize she'd been complicit. She apologized for not standing up for me. I sat there, processing. Part of me wanted to hug her. Part of me was still angry. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but I needed time before I could trust her again. 8 years of watching her beam while Richard made promises, then sitting silent when he broke them, had damaged something between us. I wanted to rebuild our relationship, but it had to be at my pace. She nodded, wiping her eyes. She understood. She'd worked to earn back my trust, however long it took. She was proud of me for standing up for myself. We sat in awkward silence until Grandma came back inside. Mom left shortly after, but her hug felt different. Less automatic, more careful. 3 days later, I was helping Grandma organize her pantry when someone knocked on the door. Grandma answered, and I heard a familiar voice that made my stomach drop. Haley, standing on the porch, looking exhausted and very pregnant. Her belly huge, her face puffy. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. Anger surged immediately. This was the same person who'd called me selfish, who'd taken my college fund and let her boyfriend waste it. Now she was here, asking for help. I wanted to tell her to leave. But Grandma, with her way of treating everyone like they deserved kindness, invited her in. Grandma led Haley to the living room and offered tea. Haley sat down heavily in the armchair and started to cry. Not quiet tears, but full-body sobs. Her boyfriend had left 2 weeks ago, packed his stuff, and drove off in the truck he bought with my college money. She was broke. 7 months pregnant, no money for baby supplies, medical bills. She didn't know what to do. Her mom couldn't help. Grandma sat down on the couch. Haley kept crying, talking between sobs. She knew the $60,000 was supposed to be my college fund. When her dad offered it, she knew it was wrong, but she convinced herself she needed it more because of the baby. She let her boyfriend control the money because she thought he'd use it responsibly. Now she admitted that money had enabled his gambling and reckless spending. She should have been more careful, more responsible. She looked at me with red eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. When she called me in October and I told her the money was gone, she got defensive because she felt guilty. She knew she'd taken something that wasn't meant for her and wasted it. Calling me selfish was easier than admitting her own terrible choices. She'd spent the past 2 months thinking about what she'd done. She apologized for her message, for everything. I sat there watching her cry. My anger started to shift into something more complicated. I was still mad, still hurt. But looking at her, pregnant and broke and scared, I could see she was paying for her choices in ways that felt almost worse than what she'd done to me. I didn't forgive her completely. Not in one conversation. But I softened enough to help. I went to Grandma's computer, pulled up websites for social services in Haley's area, programs for pregnant women, organizations that provided baby supplies and parenting classes, emergency housing. I wrote down phone numbers. Grandma added names of organizations her church worked with. We gave Haley the list. She took it with shaking hands, thanked us multiple times. She looked slightly less hopeless walking back to her car. The week before Christmas, my phone rang. Tanner Joyce. I answered. He said he needed to tell me something about Richard's employment. The company had been conducting a review of Richard's position following my Facebook post. Multiple colleagues had come forward with concerns about Richard's pattern of exaggerating and misrepresenting things. Apparently, Richard had been telling inflated stories about his accomplishments and family for years. My post had opened the floodgates. Tanner said Richard's lack of integrity and poor judgment made him unsuitable for his leadership position. They were demoting him from regional director to a standard management role, effective January 1st. I was shocked. I knew his job might be affected, but a full demotion? The company takes integrity seriously, Tanner explained, especially for people in leadership who represent the brand. I asked what this meant for Richard's salary. Tanner explained it would drop from $300,000 to about $150,000. Still comfortable, but a significant cut to his lifestyle. No more Tesla. No more European vacations. No more 6-bedroom house with a pool. Tanner said the company was giving Richard a chance to rebuild trust in a lower-stakes role. If he demonstrated consistent integrity for a year, they might consider promoting him. But for now, the demotion was final. I thanked Tanner. He said what I'd accomplished, despite Richard's betrayal, was impressive. After we hung up, I just stared at my phone. My Facebook post had cost Richard half his salary and his prestigious title. Part of me felt guilty about the severity, but another part felt like this was just Richard finally facing the results of his own choices. Mom called before I could even tell her about Tanner. Her voice sounded lighter, somehow, despite the news. She told me Richard had been demoted. The news was spreading. She explained the salary cut, the lost title. Maybe this will force him to look at his choices, she said, and think about what really matters. Her tone carried a strange relief that surprised me more than the news itself. She wasn't defending him. She sounded like someone who'd been holding her breath for years and finally let it out. We talked about household finances. She mentioned selling the Mercedes, possibly downsizing the house. I realized she was planning for a future that didn't include Richard's inflated salary. The conversation felt more honest than any we'd had in months. Christmas Eve arrived, cold and quiet. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. 7 words. I hope you're happy now. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done, just blame. I read it 3 times, screenshot it, added it to my evidence folder. Maya had suggested I document everything, and this text proved Richard still saw himself as the victim. I showed it to Grandma. She just shook her head. Some people never learn. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Grandma made cookies, and we watched old movies as snow fell. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. I felt safer there than I had in months at the place I used to call home. Christmas morning was simple and calm. Mom arrived with presents and a nervous smile. We ate breakfast, opened gifts without drama. Nobody mentioned Richard. We talked about my biology class, my research project, Grandma's church choir, my roommate, campus life. The conversation felt normal. We had turkey sandwiches for lunch. Mom laughed, a genuine, free laugh I hadn't heard in ages. When she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, "I'm proud of you." I hugged her back, feeling the first small crack in the wall between us. The day after Christmas, Violet Cameron knocked on Grandma's door. Tin of cookies, red envelope. I hadn't expected her. She said she'd been meaning to stop by. "The whole neighborhood has been discussing what happened with Richard," she said. She'd been telling everyone the real story about my college fund and how my grandmother stepped in. Other people in their social circle had reached out, asking how they could help. Violet handed me the red envelope. Inside, a Christmas card, a personal note, and a check for $500. For textbooks or whatever you need, she said. My throat tightened. Her note about believing in my future, supporting my education. She explained several other family friends wanted to contribute. I thanked her, trying not to cry. You deserve every bit of support you receive, she said. After Violet left, I sat with Grandma, processing. $500, generous but uncomfortable. I don't want to become a charity case, I told her, someone people pity. Grandma looked at me seriously. Accepting help isn't weakness or charity. It's allowing people to live their values by supporting someone who deserves it. You worked hard for 8 years based on a promise Richard broke. These people aren't pitying you. They're standing up for what's right and showing Richard his actions have consequences. Every dollar they give is a statement that they won't tolerate his lies. I thought about that perspective. Maybe she was right. Over the next few days, more money arrived. Richard's aunt, Mom's old friends, Carson Daniels. I kept a list. By New Year's Eve, the total reached almost $8,000. It wouldn't cover a full year, but it was significant. I showed Grandma the list. This is what community looks like, she smiled. The money wouldn't replace what Richard had stolen, but it reduced the burden on her life insurance savings. I felt grateful, overwhelmed, and still slightly uncomfortable. Grandma pulled out her financial records, and we made a budget. We calculated everything: tuition, housing, meal plan, books, fees, transportation. Then we added up my resources, the $8,000 from the community, my campus job savings, the remaining balance from Grandma's $40,000. We worked through scenarios. Grandma suggested fewer summer credits, but I wanted to stay on track. We figured out that with careful spending and my part-time earnings, her original $40,000 could stretch further. The community support bought us breathing room. I wouldn't have to work excessive hours, and Grandma wouldn't have to dip as deeply into her savings. We finished the budget, and I felt relieved. Grandma made me promise something. Focus on your studies. Don't take on too many work hours. My gift is an investment in your future, not a loan you need to stress about repaying. The best return I can get is you graduating with honors and becoming successful. I want you to have the education and opportunities one never got. I promised. She nodded. Then she told me about my grandfather who died before I was born and how he'd always valued education. He would have been proud to see his life insurance money going toward your Northwestern degree, she said. That made me cry a little. Thinking about a grandfather I never met investing in my future through Grandma's choice. New Year's Eve. I spent it writing thank you notes, personal messages to each person. Maya video called. I told her about the community support and budget planning. You're lucky to have people who really care about you, she said. She was right. Richard had taken my college fund, but I'd gained something more valuable. I'd found out who actually supported me and who just pretended. We talked until almost midnight. I felt genuinely happy about starting the new year. Mom called on New Year's Day with news I'd been half expecting. She'd decided to file for separation from Richard. He refused marriage counseling or apologizing to me. She was moving into an apartment in January, starting over. Her voice shook, but she sounded determined. Watching you refuse to accept Richard's treatment, she said, showed me that I didn't have to accept it either. She'd spent years trying to keep the peace and maintain their lifestyle, but the cost had been too high. She'd lost her relationship with me and her self-respect. I told her I was proud of her. Our relationship had been damaged by her silence, but hearing her take action felt like a first step toward healing. She asked if we could have lunch when I got back to campus. I said yes. We still had a lot to work through, but at least she was finally standing up for herself and for me. I cried a little that night. 3 days later, an email. Law firm's name. Stomach dropped. Richard's lawyer was demanding I sign a statement saying I'd exaggerated the situation on social media, threatening defamation claims if I didn't comply within 10 days. My post had caused serious damage to Richard's reputation. I needed to publicly retract my statements. My hands shook. I forwarded it to Mom, asking what to do. She called within minutes, voice tight with anger. "I'm contacting my own lawyer immediately," she said. "Do not respond." I spent the day anxious, wondering if Richard could actually sue me for telling the truth. That evening, Mom called back with her lawyer on the line. The lawyer asked for all my documentation. I uploaded everything. The lawyer called me directly the next morning. "You have nothing to worry about. Everything you posted is true and provable." She said Richard's lawyer was making empty threats, hoping I'd back down. I agreed to let her respond. Within hours, Mom's lawyer sent a formal response, pointing out Richard was the one who'd made false claims by taking credit for paying for my education when he'd contributed $0. The letter included copies of all my documentation. The threatening tone disappeared completely after that. Richard's lawyer sent a brief acknowledgement, and the whole thing went silent. The day before I was supposed to return to Northwestern, Haley texted me. I almost didn't open it. Instead, she wrote that she'd enrolled in a program for young mothers that would help her finish her associate degree while providing childcare. She thanked me for the resource information I'd given her at Grandma's. She knew she'd messed up. She hoped things worked out for me. I sat there for a long time before responding. I typed that I hoped things worked out for her and the baby. I kept it short. I wasn't ready for a real connection, but I could wish her well from a distance. She sent back a simple thanks and a heart emoji. Some of the tension I'd been carrying about her situation released. Going back to Northwestern felt different this time. I packed my stuff, hugged Grandma goodbye. The flight back to Chicago felt lighter, like I wasn't carrying the same weight. The family drama had settled into a new normal. Mom was leaving Richard. Haley was trying to fix her life. Richard was facing consequences. I wasn't carrying his broken promises anymore. That part of my life was over. I could focus on school without the constant stress of his manipulation. Maya met me at the dorm, coffee in hand. We caught up while unpacking. "Want a room together again next year?" she asked. "Yes," I said immediately, grateful for a friend who'd seen me through the worst of the chaos. A few days into the semester, I saw a flyer for a student organization supporting first-generation and low-income students. I went to the first meeting. We sat in a circle, sharing stories about financial struggles and family complications around college. When it was my turn, I told them about Richard's broken promise, Grandma's sacrifice, Haley getting my college fund. Several people nodded. Afterward, 3 students came up to share their own experiences. Talking about it openly with people who got it helped me process everything in a way that felt healing instead of just painful. Mom started therapy in February. She called every Sunday, updating me on her progress. She talked about working through codependency, figuring out who she was outside her marriage to Richard. She'd gotten a job interview at a marketing firm, nervous but excited. Our conversations were still sometimes awkward, but they were honest in a way they'd never been before. She apologized again for staying silent, and I told her I was working on forgiving her, but it would take time. She understood. Richard made no further attempts to contact me. Mom told me he'd moved into a condo, focused on keeping his reduced job. He'd stopped posting on social media, lost touch with most of his golf buddies. She thought he'd finally accepted that he'd destroyed our relationship permanently. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that I wouldn't have to deal with more manipulation. Sadness that 8 years of him calling me his daughter had ended with him just giving up. I applied for summer internships in March, focusing on nonprofits that worked with college access programs. The process felt easier. I could write honestly about navigating financial barriers, understanding what low-income students faced. 3 organizations called for interviews. I talked about Richard's broken promise, Grandma's sacrifice, and how education access shouldn't depend on whether your family keeps their word. The Chicago Education Initiative offered me a position 2 weeks later, working with their college prep program for high school juniors from underserved communities. $30 an hour, 20 hours a week. It would cover my textbooks for sophomore year, give me breathing room. I accepted immediately. Work that actually mattered. Finals wrapped up in May. I maintained my 4.0. Grandma called the day, grades posted. Her church wanted to throw a celebration. I tried to say it wasn't necessary. She insisted. The celebration happened on a Sunday afternoon. About 40 people from her congregation. Grandma introduced me as her granddaughter, thriving at Northwestern despite family challenges. People congratulated me. Older women hugged me, saying they'd been following my story. One man handed me a $50 bill for textbooks. It felt overwhelming in a good way, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my success, without ulterior motives. Mom called the next week. Her divorce from Richard was finalized. She sounded lighter, like a weight had lifted. She'd been seeing someone new. Cody, an accountant. He treated her with respect and kindness she hadn't experienced in years. She said watching how Grandma supported me unconditionally taught her what healthy relationships looked like. She wasn't going to settle for less anymore. I felt genuinely happy for her and told her I wanted to meet Cody. Finishing my freshman year felt surreal. I sat in my dorm room on the last day, thinking about how speaking the truth on Facebook had changed my entire life. I had my education at Northwestern, Grandma's unwavering support, a relationship with my mom that was slowly healing, and the knowledge that I didn't have to accept broken promises or let people lie about my life. Richard lost his reputation, his marriage, and his high-paying job. But I gained clarity about who actually mattered and the confidence to stand up for myself when something was wrong. This whole journey, it showed me so much about integrity, about betrayal, and about the power of speaking your truth. It was a messy, painful lesson, but I wouldn't trade the strength I found for anything. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever faced such a profound betrayal from someone you trusted? I really want to know what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below.